There's nothing quite like cracking into a lovely used book and losing yourself in a wonderful story. Used bookstores are, in my opinion, one of the holiest spaces on planet Earth, and we should all do our best to support them in any way we can. However, like all places offering things without verifiable origins, it is also indeed possible to stumble across some questionable items. You can't be sure who owned the book before you, and while sometimes that's a fun little mystery to imagine, other times it might mean you've picked up a book with a little something extra, and I'm not talking about notes in the margins or a forgotten bookmark. I'm talking curses and ghosts. It's time for the top 5 haunted books you need to pray before reading. Coming in number 5, we've got Spindrift. Before we get into all of the grimoires and necronomicons and devil bibles, we gotta pay our respects to a good old-fashioned spooky novel? Autobiography? A little mix of the two. Curling up with a creepy pile of pages on a chilly fall day, maybe with a cup of your favorite hot beverage by your side, is unmatched. If you haven't tried it yet, I beg you to forego streaming services for one day and really soak in that paperback atmosphere. Right, so once you've experienced that unique joy, you can die a happy death, which just might happen if you stumble across a copy of Spindrift. Upon first glance, this book looks like any other pulpy horror book from the 70s. However, there's definitely a lot more than meets the eye. It reads partially like a novel, sort of like an autobiography, and somewhat like an account of a haunting. The tale is that of an author, Jan Bryant Bartell, and her experiences while living with her husband in the supposedly haunted death house of Greenwich Village. Before the couple moved in, the house already had quite the reputation. Mark Twain had resided there, and even as a skeptic, he was often unsettled by the unexplainable happenings. Families moved in and out, oftentimes falling victim to tragic fates. This had a great impact on Bartell in particular, who seemed to unlock some latent psychic potential at the house. During her time here, all sorts of horrid events transpired. Her pet dog died, news of others in her life perishing came to her, and she noticed all sorts of presences throughout the house. This caused a great deal of trepidation and terror, and eventually drove the couple off the property. After witnessing 9 deaths during her stay, Bartell wanted to be as far away as possible. Following this move, she decided to commit her story to page and wrote Spindrift. She spared no detail in this extremely personal account of the haunting, and eventually did finish the initial manuscript. Unfortunately, she became the 10th victim to the house. After completing the manuscript, Bartell passed away, supposedly followed by the curse. People who read this book claim to feel a very spooky presence while flipping through the pages. There haven't been any accounts of readers falling victim yet, but I'd still be careful while reading. Coming in at number 4, we've got the Untitled Grimoires. Here we go, some real spooky stuff. When you hear the term grimoire, you know you're in for some haunted volumes, that's for sure. Especially if they remain untitled, adding to the mystery and allure. How positively chilling. These 2 tomes became objects of intrigue back in 2013 when they were sold through an online auction. They fetched quite a hefty price, coming in at around $14,000. For any other spiral-bound notebooks, that asking price would be outrageous, but the history surrounding these grimoires makes them worth every penny. Apparently they were penned by none other than Persephone Adrastea Irene, a Wiccan high priestess with a coven full of devoted followers. She was quite the spellcaster and filled the books with all sorts of magical knowledge. Over 200 pages of enchantments, incantations, summons, and spells can be found by the owner of these books. Summoning rituals for demons and spirits are a major factor here too. However, the books came with a grave warning. Any non-witches should avoid them at all costs, as Persephone left a little message behind for them. It reads, "To those not of the craft, the reading of this book is forbidden. Proceed no further or justice will exact a swift and terrible retribution. You will surely suffer at the hand of the craft." The actual threat is quite vague, but with all of the possible spells and curses and hexes listed in the book, one can assume that their punishment would have something to do with that. So if you're not praying to the goddesses of Wicca before cracking open one of these, maybe consider what you're doing. Life is hard enough without additional magical mayhem invading. You can choose not to read the Untitled Grimoires. Coming in number 3, we've got the Orphan story. So make sure you're looking very carefully at the books you're picking up. There are quite a few hardcovers and paperbacks adorned with titles similar to The Orphan Story. It could be Orphan Story, or The Orphan Story, or even just Orphan's Story. Hell, I do believe that there are books written this century called, word for word, The Orphan Story, but not the same as the tale we're about to tell. What a world, right? It's almost like orphans are classic literary tropes that get people engaged in stories quickly. Who doesn't love a good found family tale? But I'm getting off track. This tale was originally penned in the 1600s by Martin de Leon Cardenas. There's nothing particularly scary about the story itself. It's about a young Spaniard who heads to America in search of fortune. But for some reason, everyone who became involved in the publication of this book met with a grisly fate. Editors and translators who had previously worked on it died in terrible car crashes or succumbed to deadly illnesses. It seemed to go all the way back to the original story too. Hundreds of years of people attempting to get a book published only to be killed in upsetting ways. It's a wonder it got published at all. In 2018, the book was finally published, so you can head out and read it now. Although with a legacy like that, do you really want to flip through those pages? Coming in at number 2, we've got the Codex Gigas, the Devil's Bible. Who knew this was even a thing? What I like about this entry is the fact that I can make this joke now. That's right, you should be praying before you crack open a Bible because that's what people tend to do already. Heyo. Can't take full credit for that joke though because Lindsay made it to me first, so laugh away. Now, back to the actual demonic properties of this book. The Codex Gigas is an extremely large medieval illuminated manuscript containing a number of alphabets, the entire Latin Bible, the history of the Jews, medical works, the New Testament, necrology, magic formula, and more. It's known as the Devil's Bible because of the unusual illustration of a devil inside. Most Bibles tend to avoid full-page drawings of Satan. This relates back to a legend concerning this tome where a monk was accused of breaking a vow to his master. As punishment, he was to be walled up and left there. Before he could be sealed away, however, the monk desperately promised to make a book that would glorify the monastery forever. It would include all of human knowledge, a lofty goal indeed. So he set to making this beautiful book, filled with intricate calligraphy, illustrations, and embellishments. As the clock was about to run out, he realized he was still 10 pages short. In order to get it done on time and save his life, he made a deal with the fallen angel Lucifer, his soul in exchange for the completed book. Lucifer took this deal, completed the book, and had the monk put an illustration of him inside as thanks. Nowadays, under plenty of scrutiny, scholars have estimated that a book this complex would have taken something like 20 years to make, and that's without all the illustrations. Just the calligraphy. Holy smokes. And finally, at number 1, we've got the Book of Soyga. Don't laugh. Don't laugh. I know it sounds like something along the lines of Ligma, but I promise you don't want to post about this. If you begin writing about it or learning its secrets, you might be driven mad. That's exactly what happened to a scholar by the name of John Dee. He came into possession of this 16th century Latin essay on demonology and became obsessed. Down the rabbit hole he went, struggling to figure out what secrets the book might hold. He discovered that it was full of dark rituals and potentially dangerous incantations, but beyond that he couldn't really make heads or tails of it. Eventually he lost his mind. He began reaching out to people to act as mediums through which he could communicate with angels. In doing so, he apparently discovered that the book was unreadable to anyone other than the Archangel Michael. Bummer. After Dee's death, many others have attempted to make sense of this ancient tome, but to no avail. So maybe stick to fantasy novels, yeah, or some lovely non-fiction depending on your interests. A good book is hard to beat, but I can't see any of these tomes being referred to as good. Unfortunate, but fair. So what did you think of the list? Do you agree with my picks? Have you ever experienced a haunted book? Make sure you let me know down in the comments. Speaking of comments, let's take a look at some of your more salacious ones. From the top 5 scary times Ed and Lorraine Warren almost got possessed. Guide to Whatever says, why am I saying it this way? Start speaking like Chills forever. Don't bring that curse upon me. Fooly75 says Ed and Lorraine were con artists. I'm sure in the long run they helped some people, but it doesn't change the fact that I don't believe either one of them were ever possessed. This does seem to be the prevailing tale these days. Pirate Bay says, I love how the first one is just, I don't know, they might have been possessed when they were kids, who knows, LMFAO. Excellent summary, your comprehension, spot on. A couple of folks with impeccable taste showed up in the comments, which is always nice, and the bright side says, doesn't surprise if they would have been possessed. You never know. And that's all the time we have for today. I'm going to ride my office chair down a mountainside. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. It's beautiful. I think it's even better than the original. Then Persephone Adrastia Irene, a Wiccan high princess, damn it, like, what I know about it, like, all I know about the, nope, what am I saying? What I like about this entry, so he set off to making this beautiful book, filled with intricate